probably not the best day to be at the cemetery because you're not supposed to have mobile phones here, which I completely understand and I do agree with, but it is just the most beautiful place that I've just discovered. I think it's becoming my favorite place in Gozo at the moment. And something's shifting in me here on this magical island where I've often felt like I don't quite fit in. I've tried to fit in with communities here, and then I've often noticed that there's been quite a lot of toxicity, even if it's masked or disguised. And now I'm realizing that I absolutely enjoy my own company, which I probably always have, but maybe I didn't allow myself to, because there's something about spending a lot of time alone. Society kind of dictates that we should be someone that is in a partnership. We should be popular. You know, these are things that we live up to in society and we hold them in high regard. But actually, there's something quite magical when you are perfectly okay to entertain yourself and be completely alone. And I'm not alone. I mean, there's a white butterfly flying around. There are many, many bees pollinating the flowers right now. There's all these beautiful, beautiful flowers, which maybe I can introduce you to. Some yellow ones here. Hey. And it's funny, from the angle that I've got the camera and where I've set it up is kind of away from the actual cemetery. And, oh, there's a little bug here. He's so cute. Oh, he just flew away. He didn't want to be noticed. I have quite a relationship with cemeteries, and it all started when I was 16, and I don't want to get all morbid on you. I have seen the Netflix series Wednesday Addams, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, but when I came into the cemetery the other day, there's this feeling I get when I come into a cemetery. It's like, like peace. And I know it sounds funny, but there's like the tiniest bit of envy. You know, that final, lasting, resting place where you can be completely at peace. Because I don't know about you, but my journey here on earth as a human has been really, really hard. And sometimes I'm praying to God and I'm like, well, I'm not even praying to God, I'm like berating God. And I'm like, why? It's not fair. When is the abundance coming? When are the rewards coming? I feel like all I do is work. And I'm not just talking about material work for money. I'm talking about working on, you know, ourselves, like the spiritual journey, right? And when I was 16, I was at the Royal Ballet School. And, I mean, I worked my ass off to get into that place. That it was all I wanted at the time. And when I finally succeeded, it was a nightmare. And I was in a place where I was being bullied by the students. I was not in a safe environment. Nobody cared. None of the staff cared whether I was safe or happy or well. You know, we were pushed to a point that was beyond what my body could take. My body was unhappy. My mind was unhappy. You know, it was a real nightmare. And I used to escape behind the Royal Ballet School in Talgarth Road, Barons Court in London, where it used to be. There's a cemetery, and I used to go and escape there. And I would sit in the cemetery with my Embassy No. 1 cigarettes, which was what I used to smoke at the time. I don't smoke anymore. I haven't smoked for a year and 4 months now. And I will never, ever, ever go back to that frequency, that low vibration of smoking. I just don't resonate at all. Like, I've healed that. It took a long time. It's a very, very addictive subject, which I will save for another video. But, so I'm sitting in the cemetery, smoking my Embassy No. 1s. I tell my nephew, you know, who has a kind of emo vibe, I'm like, I was like the original emo. It was 1997. I was wearing all black, smoking Embassy No. 1s. I was 16, barely 16, living away from home, you know, probably had some wine gums, you know, those sweets, like, and it was like the only place where I felt like I could go and feel sane was amongst dead people, because I think I literally felt like death. And I used to have recurring dreams. I had this one recurring dream where I was a skeleton. Okay, maybe I should do a warning now. If this is going to freak you out, you can pause the video and move elsewhere. Okay, so I was a skeleton hanging in my bathroom, and there was like one bit of flesh on my hip. And this sounds really creepy when I say it out loud, but I used to have this recurring dream as a teenager, and I literally wanted someone to cut that one bit of flesh off, because that was the one bit that was keeping me alive. Now, as I say it out loud to you and not in my head, I realize that that is one messed up dream. But I had no one to share that dream with. But I remember it was recurring. And there was this feeling that I wanted to die, because it was just too hard for me, and I didn't understand why people were so unkind and why people would want to destroy another person, like what was happening to me at the Royal Ballet School. And I heard recently that the Royal Ballet School is being sued, and they got in contact with me to ask me about my story, and I was disappointed to discover that the lawsuit is being based around body shaming. And I'm kind of like, yeah, ballet, it kind of comes with the territory. I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying it's right, but if you want to have normal bodies, I think you'll probably shut down that whole industry, which probably wouldn't be a bad thing, because it's a very dangerous, harmful environment for the body. Like it, but it didn't always be that way. Back in the 50s and 60s, sorry to geek out on ballet for a minute, you might not know anything about it, but back in the 50s and 60s, the bodies were not so extreme. They were not anorexic to the point of distortion. They were not being pushed to their athletic limits to the point where, your bones are being destroyed. I mean, I had a friend who at the age of 26, which is very young, had a hip operation. Another friend of mine became like the prima ballerina at the Royal Ballet, a really sweet woman from the Ukraine, and she, or maybe Russia, I'm not sure, and she had a neck injury so bad. Imagine needing to operate on your neck. I myself, at the age of 18, had to have a bone spur, which is it's not a bone that's removed, it's a lump of built up calcium. I'm so grossing you out on this video. I had no idea what was going to come out of me today in these really peaceful settings here. But anyway, that's just what's flowing. So yeah, I had a bone spur removed from my Achilles, which, is because of repetition of going up on point shoes, and moving your feet up, down, up, down, up, down all the time. So it was a harsh environment, not just because of the training. I think if I hadn't been bullied, I might have been able to, I would have been able to maintain the level of mental, the mental tenacity needed to be the kind of athlete I needed to be as a ballet dancer. I would have been okay if I had not been bullied. But the bullying distracted me, which was the bully's intention, because there is such a fierce competition. I think at least once a year, if not more, they are assessing you to see if you're going to go into the next term or the next year. They keep it very competitive. If you don't make the grade, you can be cut at any point. It's like doing a Simon Cowell audition. And I mean, honestly, right now, Simon Cowell looks tame to me compared to what I went through. But you get the idea. Most people would consider Simon Cowell's way of treating people as to be a bit harsh. And I don't really condone that kind of thing either. I don't really see why we need competition at all, because I think the only one we should be competing against is ourselves. But that's the environment I was in, and it's fiercely competitive. And I used to go and sit in the cemetery, like I said, and smoke my cigarettes and feel at peace, you know. And there's something now for me about cemeteries where I feel really happy. I don't know, it's like, I know this sounds morbid, but it's like, oh, one day I will, you know, because something I learned from grief when the closest being in my life died last year, like we're coming up to a year now. What I learned from my spiritual teacher, my amazing spiritual teacher, G.P. Walsh, who you'll hear me refer to so many times, I'll add links below so that you can seek out his work and stuff, is that when someone dies, it's not you don't die, okay? So when someone dies in your life, they're not dead, okay? You got to get this. It's the body that dies. And as I said that, a gunshot went off because here in Gozo, they shoot birds for no reason. Don't get me started. But anyway, death just happened instantly with that bullet as I am giving my display of death right now, right? So when someone dies, the spirit leaves the body. Right? So when my cat died, and I might do a whole video, I'm sure I'll do a whole video on the experience and the grief and everything. My channel is going to get really morbid. Don't worry, it's not all going to be like this. When he died, and as you can tell, I can talk about it without crying, without any leftover unhealed parts of myself, because I grieved properly, right? I really, really fully did the grieving process, which was 3 full days, plus about 3 weeks, okay, for me to be fully cleansed, right? And if you do the grieving process properly, I feel you should be complete. You shouldn't be stuck in remorse, in regret, in suffering. The suffering should be gone. Because if you understand this one thing about death, you can be at peace more easily. So when my cat died, that was the closest being in my life. We were together for 9 years. I saw him being born. I saw him die. When he died and his spirit left the body, and I brought his body home to be buried, he didn't even look like my animal. He didn't even look like my baby, my partner in crime, the being that I love the most in the whole wide world. He didn't look like that. He was like, you know, he didn't even look like himself, because as my spiritual teacher said, he didn't die. His body died. His spirit goes on. And what you have to understand is it's the spirit that animates the body, right? And once you take the spirit out, you just have the body without the spirit to animate the body, which is why he doesn't even look like him. Once you understand this, you can understand that there's nothing to be afraid of with death, because you are not going to die. Your body is going to die, right? Which is why we don't want to get attached to these bodysuits. It's just a bodysuit. It's just a bodysuit. I'm pretty happy with the bodysuit I was given, and I know for those of you who used to watch my former content, a lot of people came just for my body. And then they stayed for the conversation, which was me. So, if we can understand this, that the spirit animates the body, and once the spirit leaves the body, it's just the body that dies, then we can be so much more at peace with the idea of death, knowing that we're never actually going to die, because energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be transformed. So I can only imagine what Marvin, my beautiful cat, became. I think he was probably done being in his fluffy white and tabby bodysuit, maybe like he needed to evolve. I also believe that we probably made a contract together before he came into this earth, before we came together, that would happen. It was probably designed that way because I needed to experience the kind of grief that I could only have experienced with that kind of unconditional love. And because of that, I got access to heal layers of sadness that I wouldn't have been able to heal had I not been able to reach that level of grief. Also, I love the sound of the church bells. I don't go to church. I'm very spiritual. I'm not religious. I'm happy to read the Bible. I know that Jesus Christ is a brilliant teacher, but bells to me remind me of The Sound of Music, which was one of my favorite childhood movies. So I'm sorry, I'm just distracted by the bells right now. Anyway, so I'm not allowed to be on my mobile phone here, which is what I'm filming on. So kind of looking around like a naughty schoolgirl right now, but I'm gonna see if we can take a little walk so I can show you the cemetery, because I think it's really, really quite stunning. There was one more thing I wanted to say about Marvin. So the first was that we have contracts with people before we come into this life that we forget once we sign up for this life, and then they came into our life as a teacher, right? Okay, so that's what I was going to say, is that because of discovering how amazing unconditional love is and what it feels like, my cat, Marvin, whose original name was Friend, he's the gauge of what unconditional love feels like. And now I'm at that point where I'm like, if I meet a man and it doesn't feel like that, I'd rather be alone. All right, on that note,